Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dukakis Center Live. I'm David Wisner, your host. This will be the final in a series of monthly presentations and discussions in the English language on Anik Nefsi's web TV. And I'd like just to thank our host, Pantelis Savidis, for agreeing to air these programs live monthly. And I'm happy to announce that as far as I know, we're going to continue. So there's a lot to look forward to in 2022. And one of the things perhaps we'll see is some development in the Eastern Mediterranean, in the Aegean, in relations between Greece and Turkey, Cyprus and Turkey, perhaps Israel and Cyprus. And lurking in the background is the United States, still an important player in regional affairs. And with this in mind, I thought, wouldn't it be nice to host an old friend, Alan Markovsky, from the Center for American Progress, who has an unparalleled expertise in Turkish politics, in the politics and geostrategy of the Eastern Mediterranean, who is an old friend, as I say, who's appeared on 3 occasions already at the Dukakis Center, including a webinar we did last year, almost precisely 12 months ago, just after it appeared certain that Joe Biden had won the presidential election in 2020 and that he would be imminently setting up his administration and looking to establish a firm foundation for his foreign policy. Alan has spent time in the US Congress as a senior aide. He's also been a senior fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Politics. And now he's at the Center for American Progress, as we've just mentioned. Well, there are 3 topics that I thought we would talk about today, Alan, and thank you very much for appearing with me. Look a little bit at what's happening in the Biden administration, just to get us settled. This is a program dedicated to U.S.-Turkish relations. And then shift a little bit to see what we understand of the current situation in Turkey. There's a lot of news reports, and some of them are contradictory, and some of them are difficult to believe. So perhaps you have a sense of what's happening. You can clarify a few of our questions for us. And then because you're imminently departing for Cyprus, you're going to join us in this part of the world. Perhaps you'd like just to add a few words on what you see happening in Cyprus and how Cyprus connects in this broader region of ours. So once again, welcome. Why don't you just think a little bit out loud? What have we seen in the Biden administration and basically in the last well, it's really now since January that he was inaugurated, but we're talking a year after the election. What are the brushstrokes, let's say, that you might paint to give us a picture of the foreign policy of the Biden administration?
Well, thank you very much, David. First of all, it's terrific to see you, and it's a real honor to be invited back to the Dukakis Center. It's always a great pleasure. As you said, I think this is my 4th time with the Dukakis Center, and I have enjoyed immensely my relationship with the center, and terrific to be back. Regarding Biden and Turkey, look, I think Biden came to office with the sense that Turkey had been coddled too much by previous administrations. Not Trump, of course, but also Obama. And I think they wanted to, first of all, regularize things, not have the president talking on the phone to Erdogan constantly, as had been the case under the previous 2 presidents. And immediately they set about doing that, and I think successfully. The president did not speak with Erdogan, did not return his phone calls, and did not speak directly with him until April 23rd. Why do I remember specifically that it was April 23rd? Because the main reason for the phone call was for President Biden to tell President Erdogan that on the following day, Armenian Genocide Day, April 24th, he would recognize the genocide, becoming the first US president to do so. There has been two subsequent contacts in person at a NATO meeting in June and more recently at the G20 meeting. And I think things have calmed down a bit in US-Turkish relations. Turkey has been itself less assertive this year than it was last year. And the most recent item on the agenda is Turkey's request to buy 40 F-16 Block 70s, same type that's in the Greek inventory, and another, in addition, another 40, 80 kits overall that would upgrade to Block 70, which is the most advanced form of the F-16. And that issue is now being kicked around. I think that I think that Turkey understands, Erdogan has even said he understands the administration will push for it, but that it's got to get through the US Congress. And that's where the big question mark is. But while this is in play, and this will just be the last comment I make on it, while this is in play, I think the hope in the United States is that things will remain more or less calm in US-Turkish relations. So that's a broad one-year overview.
That's perfect. And I was going to ask you about congressional leadership, but let's see the big package, because you know, we have a tendency in this part of the world to think that the problems in Greece and the Aegean and Turkey, Greek-Turkish relations are the only ones that count in international relations, at least if you're a student of, you know, U.S. foreign policy. The Biden administration has some bigger fish to deal with, Russia and Ukraine. There's the issue of U.S.-China bilateral relations. We just recently observed the Summit for Democracy, and that was meant to be one of the cornerstones of Biden administration foreign policy. So, you know, when you look at the really big picture, a global picture, where does U.S.-Turkish relationship stand?
Well, you rightly point out that the primary focus of U.S. foreign policy is in China these days. And arguably, all of our relationships in Europe and in the Middle East have been knocked down a peg. But I actually think Turkey remains an important element in U.S. foreign policy. Look, Turkey, I probably don't have to remind your audience about the geography, but Turkey borders 8 countries, including Greece. It is across the Black Sea from Russia, and Russia is also in Syria, which is on Turkey's southern border. And the U.S., I think, continues to have a real interest in that part of the world. Now, you will hear most people say that U.S. interest in the Middle East is diminishing, and for that matter, in the East Med, that it's diminishing. I am of a somewhat different opinion. We continue to have an interest in keeping shipping lanes open. We continue to have an interest in reasonable energy rates, even though the U.S. is close to energy independent. Our allies are not. continue to depend on hydrocarbons from the broader region that Turkey is in. And of course, the U.S. remains committed as one pillar of its foreign policy to the security of the state of Israel. So I think for all of those reasons, and of course, let me hasten to add, even though many people, including those in the region, seem to think the U.S. is leaving, we still have troops and bases throughout the region, including 2,500 troops in Iraq and another 900 working with the Kurds in Syria. So I think Turkey remains important. Is it as important as China or Russia? No, but it, I think, still remains an important relationship.
Okay, that's good. Now, when you talk about an administration, you're not talking merely about the President of the United States. You're talking about his Secretary of State, his National Security Advisor. You're talking about senior aides. You're talking potentially about senior members of Congress, particularly in the Senate. As you look at the panoply of players involved in the foreign policy establishment currently in Washington, D.C., who has the president's ear and who's really playing a leading role with regard to our interest in the Eastern Mediterranean and in this whole environment that you just outlined, the neighborhood in which Turkey finds itself? Who are the players that you'd be watching, for example, there when you go to your office at the Center for American Progress, when you're thinking with your colleagues about important developments in American policy?
Look, first of all, I think it's important to point out that the Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, and the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, have extensive experience in this region of the world, particularly Tony Blinken, who actually covered Turkey, Greece, and Cyprus as a young officer in the National Security Council of President Bill Clinton in the 1990s. And then he always maintained a deep interest when he worked for then Senator Biden and Vice President Biden. So I think he's important in calling the shots. We have, I think the Biden administration has been slow to fill its jobs and in the foreign policy realm, its senior positions, and Congress has been even slower at approving. But I think, look, the person at the National Security Council who is in charge of the region is Amanda Sloat, who actually is a former colleague of mine on the House Foreign Affairs Committee staff a decade ago. And she worked on Turkey also in the Obama administration. She has a longstanding relationship with them. But I really feel that this part of the world is something that Blinken and Sullivan watch closely personally. So I think Amanda Sloat is important. I think our ambassadors in Greece and Turkey are important players, but on big issues, I think Blinken and Sullivan are involved. And also, we shouldn't forget that the President of the United States, President Biden himself, has extensive experience in this part of the world and was long very close with many Hellenic Americans. Actually, and his experience goes back so far that he actually voted for the arms embargo following the invasion of Cyprus in 1975, and then actually voted against the lifting of it in 1978. He's one of two active politicians still active who were involved in that vote.
Okay, so that's a long memory also.
That's a long memory. And, he visited Cyprus as a vice president. And there is more senior level expertise on the Eastern Med in this administration than we've ever had.
Okay. Let's invoke short-term memory. If you think about your predictions, if you will, for the Biden administration a year ago and what you see taking place now, does anything surprise you, or are you a little disappointed potentially? I know the issue of the Senate confirmation of ambassadorial nominees is a bit problematic, the so-called Josh and Ted show. There are a lot of holds, including on our friend Nicholas Burns, who's been nominated to represent the United States.
I believe that was lifted finally. I believe he was confirmed yesterday.
Okay, well, I saw rumors about that, but there was some horse trading, I think, also. But you know, are there any, you know, is there anything sort of stand out where you were a year ago and where we are now?
Yes, in some ways, yes. I've been somewhat surprised. I thought that there would be much more emphasis on human rights. Now, I'm talking from a Turkish point of view. In general, I thought the administration would put more emphasis on human rights than it has operationally. It has talked about it, but again, particularly regarding Turkey, it's had a much lighter touch than I expected. It came in like gangbusters and demanding the release of Osman Kavala and Selahattin Demirtas, Kavala being a dissident, somebody who has supported minority causes. I mean, you couldn't meet a more peaceful individual. And Selahattin Demirtas being the leader of the party that's most associated with the Kurdish cause in Turkey, and they're both in jail. The administration talked about that, I think, the second week in office, but there really has not been a big push on human rights. There have been occasional statements on Turkey, but probably not as much as I think many Turkey watchers in Washington believe the situation merits, given all the repression that's been going on in Turkey, the arrests, the 28,000 cases of against people for insulting Erdogan, and
we have to be careful right here, huh? We're closer.
Yeah, well, I'm not in Turkey, so I think I can. I think I'm relaxed enough on that. But
all right, we'll get to that in just a minute. But maybe we shift our focus now. What is happening in Turkey? I mean, there's an awful lot of discussion in the mainstream media in the United States of his economic policy, which seems from a distance to be a train wreck. But I read maybe 2 or 3 months ago an article suggesting that Erdogan was quite ill. He's the sick man of Europe, so to speak. But what do you have to say? A person asks you what is happening in Turkey. Is there a short answer to that question?
Well, the biggest thing going on in Turkey is the meltdown of the lira, of course, which has lost over 50% of its value against the dollar and against the euro just in this calendar year. And lately, it's in total free fall. It seems every day it gets a lira cheaper to buy I'm sorry, it gets a lira more expensive every day to buy a dollar. Today, I believe it hit 17 as of this morning. So that is the biggest thing going on. And, related to that is the fact that Erdogan has been dropping in the polls. Not quite as rapidly as the lira has been dropping, but pretty dramatically. And one of the better polling services, one that I use a lot, called.
Yeah. Whoops. Here we've lost. Hold on. We've lost your audio. Hold on a minute, Alan. We've lost your audio. Yeah, we've lost your audio. I don't know if you can hear me, but your microphone seems to be muted. Whoops. No. We're having some technical difficulties here, so I'll just. We're speaking now with Alan Makovsky, live from his studio in Washington D.C. He's
ας βγάλει τα ακουστικά αν μπορεί, κύριε Wisner. Πείτε
okay.
του αν θέλει να βγάλει τα ακουστικά.
Alan, our technical staff suggests that you remove the earplugs, the headphones, and we might regain your audio. We've lost him from the studio. Well, I'll recap a little bit, folks. If you're watching, we've taken a few questions which we hope to get to when Alan returns to the studio. We're speaking with Alan Makovsky, a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress in Washington, D.C. An old friend now. He's been to the Dukakis Center physically on 2 occasions in Thessaloniki, and he appeared in a webinar that we hosted almost a year ago, just as it was appearing pretty straightforward that Joe Biden had actually won the presidential election, and he was going to start putting together his foreign policy team. And we've had some technical difficulties. We lost him here, but Alan's been sharing his understanding of the importance of Turkey's relationship with the United States, and he's also been giving a picture of who's really important in policy making in Washington D.C. He mentioned the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State, and of course. President Biden, we were reminded, is one of 2 politicians still in office who was serving in some official capacity in 1974. And so he has a very long track record of involvement in Turkish affairs and affairs in the Eastern Mediterranean. A question that I was hoping to ask him, if we are able to have him rejoin the studio, is whether or not the relative upgrade in U.S.-Greek relations has any implications for U.S.-Turkish relations. And thinking about the military sales and military cooperation. For example, in the port of Alexandroupoli, there's a lot of things been happening in our part of the world in the last year, which are certainly, I think, if you're a Hellene, they're rather flattering that the U.S.-Greek relationship is so strong. Alan is here, and he was telling us a little bit about the free fall of the lira and what else is happening domestically in Turkey. And, whether we should really be concerned, I guess.
So I'm not exactly sure where I cut off, but related to the fall of the lira and the problems in the Turkish economy, which go much deeper than just the fall of the lira, 20% unemployment, inflation of 20%. And by the way, people tend not to believe those numbers. Those are official numbers. People think inflation is much higher. Much higher. Related to that is the fall in Erdogan's popularity. For so long, Erdogan stood like a colossus over Turkish politics. But right now, in head-to-head polls, he trails several people in the opposition. One poll recently had the mayor of Ankara, who is a member of the opposition, 19 points ahead of Erdogan in head-to-head. So a lot of things are going on. Elections must be held by June of 2023. They could be held earlier. One thing that your audience may not know, since I know Greece has a traditional parliamentary system, and Turkey for many, many years had a traditional parliamentary system. But under the new constitutional amendments that Erdogan brought to make it a more presidential focused system. There are separate votes for the presidency and for the parliament. So, so these head-to-head polls are very, very significant. And Erdogan's got to be very worried right now. And of course, that has a lot of implications.
Yeah, that reminds us, because the last time you were here at the behest of the Dukakis Center, that is to say in Thessaloniki, it was just a day or two after the local elections, which saw, for example, in the first round, the opposition party candidate emerge victorious in Istanbul. So now we're looking ahead, and that seems to be the focal point for a good number of commentary, a good deal of commentary, excuse me. But you know, what should we, as more attuned observers, be looking for? You mentioned a poll that you watch, which is showing that he's doing rather poorly at the present moment. But what will be the key index in the more immediate run up to the election in Turkey?
Look, I think there's two things. One is absolutely the economy. Erdogan rode to power in 2002 on the basis of the collapsed economy of his predecessor. He inherited a very good program that his predecessor government had set up with the IMF, but it was set up too late to save the neck of the government that set it up. Working off that program, Turkey's economy just took off in the first decade of this century, and per capita income increased by more than 2.5 times. And the economy is always going to be important. So I think that's one thing to watch. The other thing to watch, pollsters always ask, who did you vote for in the last election? We're starting to see erosion of support for Erdogan's party, even among those who voted for it in the last election. Not just erosion, but some drift over to the opposition rather than merely to undecided. And I think that's something to keep an eye on. But look, if it's a traditional election, the economy will be determinative. There is concern among many Turkey watchers, and I should say, based on the polls, among many Turks, that if Erdogan loses, that he may not be willing to leave office. He may try to stay anyway. And of course, there's also concern about cheating. So a lot of people feel that Erdogan's neck is on the line if he loses power, because there is such a widespread belief that that he has been corrupt, particularly people around him, and that he would be facing countless court cases and perhaps jail time were he to lose. So the stakes are very high for him.
Yeah, I think that we saw a little bit of that already with the the elections in Istanbul and Ankara, when the opposition candidates were victorious, and then suddenly there's a question about whether there was some fraud and something incorrect in the administration of the election, and they wanted to have a do-over. And one does fear, when you have a person as so central to everything that happens in political life in Turkey, as is Erdogan, that you would have this fear in the presidential election if he's not elected, or if it seems as if he's going to lose, then who knows what's going to happen. There's a big question mark there. I had a question from one of our viewers in Connecticut, of all places. You see, this is a global phenomenon. It's a question that I hear frequently from people we deal with in Thessaloniki also. Doesn't it appear as if there's a kind of a double standard in the way the United States deals with its allies, notably countries like Greece on the one hand and Turkey on the other. Greece appears to be loyal. It has a functional democracy. It doesn't always work perfectly, but it's functional. And the relationship currently between Greece and the United States is potentially at an all-time high. And yet Turkey, on the other hand, is given an awful lot of the benefit of the doubt that is, well, maybe there's a separate standard for Turkey. I'm afraid we seem to have lost Alan yet again. I can perhaps review some of the other questions that are coming in. I want to thank our viewers in Greece and in the United States. And there is, you know, whether it would be appropriate to compare Erdogan and Donald Trump, bearing in mind the behavior of the outgoing president in 2020 in the U.S. elections, whether that's a kind of a template for populists in office that you'll see in countries perhaps like Turkey or elsewhere where the democracy is less well established. I have to apologize once again. We've had some technical difficulties keeping Alan on the line. He has called in from his office in Washington, D.C., where he's a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. You didn't tune in to watch me opine about Turkey, but let's see if we can get Alan to come back. I had thought just to announce that he's on his way to Cyprus. He was in Greece not too long ago. A fine interview in the pages of Cathy Marion, the English edition, by Vasilis Nedos, a fellow colleague based in Athens. And he has been with us quite frequently here in Thessaloniki, as I mentioned. Well, I don't know what else we can do while we await Alan coming back. I will announce one or two items that are on the agenda for the Dukakis Center. This is the Dukakis Center live, monthly live broadcast on the Anik Nefsis web TV channel. We will be hosting the 4th annual Thessaloniki Civil Society Forum in late January 2022. We're already organizing events for next year. And we will also finally host an online exhibition of banners and posters created for events organized and hosted by the Dukakis Center since November 2011, when what was an endowed chair became a full-fledged academic center. The Dukakis Center is based on the campus of ACT, the American College of Thessaloniki, where I also happen to teach international relations. Why, I don't know what else I can say here with respect to our guest. Perhaps we'll sign off, but leave one question for our audience. And I see that there is some response on the chat and on our social media platforms, that indeed there is some degree of trouble with the fact that Greece is dealt with one way for all its loyalty and its sympathy to the values that are espoused in U.S. foreign policy. And Turkey is dealt with another way. That seems to be a function of contemporary international relations, as one of our viewers seems to think. The question for me would always be not so much what happens if and when Erdogan is on the losing end of the stick in a major national election in Turkey, but when, if at all, Turkey will be deemed a country not worthy of membership in NATO. Because that is one of the questions the pundits are always asking with the issue of Turkish-Russian relations, particularly on the military front, and with the question of Turkey's behavior in Iraq during the Syrian crisis. the question of Turkish provocation of Greek Greek territorial interests. Is there a moment, if ever, that Turkey will no longer be a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization? Why, I don't know. I'm not getting any word back from Alan. So I think, Pendalis, I'm just going to sign off. I want to thank everyone for joining us this past several months on these monthly live broadcasts on Anik Nefsi's Web TV. Great opportunity to wish everybody a happy holiday, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. To Alan, who celebrated Hanukkah not too long ago. It's a joyous season. It's a time to relax a little bit and take stock and be happy that we're with our loved ones. And I'm grateful for the collegiality that I enjoy at ACT and in the public universities among my colleagues there, and among the journalists in Thessaloniki and Athens also. They're fantastic colleagues. They're fantastic people to be around. If you're a Hellene, you have a lot to be proud of when you look at how capable and productive some of these people are. So with that, I'm going to say once again, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Good night.